Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
See,
Hallelujah to you too.
your pastors, your priests, your ministers will tell you there's 3 ways to heaven. Oh, that's a new one? Well, then why would they teach you of there's a Father, there's a Son, and there's a Holy Ghost? But these 3 are one? No. If the Father sits on high throne in heaven, and the Son sits any place else, that's 2. And you cannot divide Yahweh. The name is above all names. There's no other name given under heaven or earth that anybody's called their dog or their aunt or their uncle or anybody. The Tetragrammaton is the supreme name of the universe.
That's right.
But, i.e., Jesus is the Savior of the world. End to end. Start to finish. From the first to the last. It's Yahweh's history.
That's right.
It's Israel's historicity. Remember, historicity, real time, actual places, and true events, not miscued and confused. As I get through my introduction today, I'm going to start out in Deuteronomy chapter 19. So remember, Yahweh God has given us this history book, approximately 75% to the nation of Israel. Every time I use the word Israel today, I refer to a man, not a landmass. A nationality. Israel was given to the man Jacob that wrestled with the angel of Yahweh all night. And the angel of Yahweh says in your book of books, the holy parchments, that his name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. And the people and descendants of Jacob, surnamed Israel, that crossed through the Caucasus Mountains were renamed Caucasians, as was prophesied by Isaiah, that they have a new name. But that's a lecture in and by itself.
That's right.
And for the blockheads that do not wish to absorb and understand this information, now that's judgment that you will have to answer for yourself. Excuse me. We're going to have, how many times have I stood before at this pulpit since the last feast of last year? I spoke about how the law has not been put away by Yahweh God, only by the Judeo-Christian ministers, pastors, priests, and prophets. Okay, it's time for me to step out from proving to you over and over and over again, and over and over and over some more, and on and on and on, till I'm not tired of it, and I could continue that line, but I'll get back to it. It's time to teach you some law. As we go into this time heading for Passover, I need to lay this groundwork to get into Passover, to explain the source, the Abba. That's why today we're going to discuss the man to the woman as the woman to the man. See, it works both ways. This is an interconnecting relationship that was ordained by Yahweh God, and there's rules, regulations, and consequences that we'll get into slightly today. I'm Yahweh's Witness teacher, Ray Bunzow, P.O. Box 143, Roscommon, Michigan, 48653, U.S. of A. Today is the 19th day of March, 2011. And see, in the Catholicistic year, this is just 2 days before spring. But in the Hebraic year, this is 2 days before the year 5772. We're getting ready for the new year. We're right on the cusp of the new year. With a full moon tonight that's as close to this earth excuse me, as it's been for almost 2 decades. Almost. Next, please. It's going to set up a situation where the gravitational pull of the moon is going to upset the tides. It's going to upset the groundwaters and the rivers and every bit of fluid in man, woman, river, stream, and ocean and sea throughout this entire globe. But what does that have to do with man to woman? Because we work on a water system. We're mostly water. A few minerals, a little bit of dust. Now see, here not too long ago, this is an interesting matter of fact. I heard that they have proven that the monkey's DNA is 97% perfect match to man's DNA. Now isn't that interesting?
Yes.
But what does that mean? Absolutely nothing. Scratch that. Because now think of this. Clouds, watermelon, and jellyfish are all 97% water. And what relationship do they have with each other?
None.
None. Now as we get into this law today in Deuteronomy chapter 15, chapter 19, verse 15, Moses tells the people, a single witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, and any sin that he sinneth. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every matter be established. And then you go back into 3 Corinthians chapter 1. Oh, you didn't know there was a 3 Corinthians? Let's go back there. Now that's just the last page before Galatians. You know that as 2 Corinthians chapter 13. And it reads, "This is the 3rd time I am writing unto you." See now, John wrote small letters. Paul wrote a small letter to Titus and to others, Philemon. But here, this is the 3rd time Paul is writing to the Corinthians, but they added as a footnote on the 2 Corinthians. It says, "This is the 3rd time I write unto you. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established." Now there's your 2 witnesses that says, by 2 or 3 witnesses, I have to go into depth and explain this. Now let's go back to Genesis chapter 1. We're going to do some gymnastics through the material today. Just to set the groundwork. Genesis 1:26. Yahweh said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and every creepy thing that creepeth upon the earth." So Yahweh created man in his image. In the image of Yahweh created he them, male and female, created Yahweh them. See, right here, when we go over to Genesis chapter 2, it's going to show you that Adam had to work before he got a helpmate. And right here, your lower case, male and female, people looking like beings, were established on this planet Earth. Now let's go over to Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. And Yahweh formed man, Adam, see this is 119 in the Hebrew Concordance. Brush is ready. Yahweh formed Adam of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, giving this man a living soul. But over here, male and female didn't get the soul.
That's right.
That's why the other nationalities are lower than the Israelites. They're a different race. They're a different stock. They're a different mindset. Now, just for the sake of time, we're going to jump down here to verse 18 of Genesis chapter 2. And Yahweh said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him." And see then, now, right down here for the next 5 verses, you've got Adam's work. And we'll pick up in verse 21 here. And Yahweh caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. Adam slept, and Yahweh took one of the ribs and closed up the flesh thereof. Excuse me. And the rib which Yahweh had taken from Adam made he woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called wombed man, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his woman were not ashamed," because they didn't understand what was to come. So they weren't ashamed to be like they were in a natural spiritual body on this planet. But now to get into that, that's another story in and by itself. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. Now remember, man to woman and woman to man. That's our topic today. After Eve was seduced in the garden, Yahweh made a proclamation. Verse 16. And unto the woman Yahweh said, "I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception in sorrow, and you shall bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over you. He shall lead you. He shall guide you. He shall be your source," is what that's trying to say there. Verse 17. And unto Adam Yahweh said, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have partaken of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which I, Yahweh, commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not partake of the tree of wisdom of good and evil. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, for in sorrow," it says here, "but in toil and labor shall thou eat from the ground all the days of your life." There's where our problems started. Man listened to his woman. This is the first of my examples today. Now let's go over to Genesis chapter 16. Verse 2. This is another patriarch. Abraham. He listens to his woman. And then she rebukes him for her suggestions. And let's see, this is Sarai here. This is before it's Sarah. Excuse me. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her handmaid, the Hamite. See, it says in your book here, Egyptian, but Hagar was from the land of Ham in those days. Let's keep this real. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar for her handmaid, the Hamite, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went into her, Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, Sarai was distressed in her own eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon you. I have given my handmaid unto thy bosom, and when she saw she had conceived, I despised in her eyes, and Yahweh judged between you and me. Now we're going to try and come back to this story in a little bit, but here, Abraham, when his name is still Abram, listened to his wife to partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because this is not what Yahweh wanted for Abraham, to share his dominion of this earth with any other than with the nationality he's to set up. Now let's go over for the third witness to 1 Kings chapter 11. And we have to see here, the wisest individual spoken of in the parchments was also the most stupid, because he chose by his own free will to do that which was outside the covenant Yahweh had given to him. 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 1. We're going to set up the story here. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of the Pharaoh, woman of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which Yahweh said unto the children of Israel, You shall not go unto them, neither shall they come unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart from Yahweh. And Solomon clave. Now that's a nice word there, clave. So you have to study this out. Solomon attached, joined, and fastened himself unto these strange women. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away, his heart was not perfect with Yahweh, as was the heart of David his father, because David stood right in the laws, the judgments, and the commandments of Yahweh. Now, for the sake of time, jump right over to verse 9 here. Yahweh was angry with Solomon because Solomon's heart was turned from Yahweh, God of Israel, which had appeared unto Solomon twice, and had commanded Solomon concerning this thing, that he should not go after other deities. But Solomon kept not that which Yahweh commanded. Wherefore Yahweh said unto Solomon, Forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and give it to a servant. Now that's nice. See, our forefathers, every time they get outside the law, there's problems. Every time the teachers and the prophets and the priests today want to tell the people that the laws of Yahweh have been put away, then there's no government established in this nation for Yahweh to take control. Excuse me. Now stop and think. There was a song out years ago. Is it hip to be square? Or do we have to fall in line with all the new diversity, the new changes, the new international mongrelization that comes down the line? Or should we stay and be square with the old ways? What has happened to our way of life? Why have we given our way of life to these bankers? The New York Stock Exchange, the commodity markets, they control every aspect of our life, right into the medical profession. Right, every aspect of our life is controlled by the Jew bankers that have the Edomite bloodline spoken about in 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 5 and 6, where Israelites and the Assyrians could not defeat the Judeans, but went down on the port city of Elath and kicked the Jews out and reclaimed the port city in Edom, Esau's territory, otherwise known as Edomia. Now what does that have to do with men to women? See, there's a pecking order. As we get back over here in Ephesians, there's some things that are said there that the way it's put down in the King James is very confusing unless you work to study these things out. So from here, we need to see the original law. We'll go back to Deuteronomy chapter 22. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22. Excuse me. If a man be found laying with a woman, married to a husband, they both shall die. Both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, so shalt thou put away evil from Israel. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed to her husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then yes, shall bring them both out of the gates of the city, and you shall stone them. And see, with the sexual immorality that goes on in this nation today, they tell you, this is fornication. This is adultery. I tell you, they're wrong. Adultery has nothing to do with a man and another woman outside of a family or a husband-wife or a man and woman relationship. Adultery is different. Fornication, in the Greek when it comes up in the new parchments you call the New Testament, is not having sex with something other than a temple prostitute over at the temple of Bacchus. Or when the virgins were let loose in Greece for the Ishtar festival in the spring, you call Easter. Now see, this is not adultery. This is not fornication. This is infidelity. This is because people do not want to understand and obey Yahweh God's laws. Simple. Adultery. That's when you take and you mix a beefsteak tomato with a yellow pear tomato and you get a pear steak tomato. That's adultery. And that goes into every stage of life. I heard it well one time. A man says you can take ice cream in this hand, you can take axle grease in this hand, and the two commodities for what they're worth in their arena are fine properties. But you put the two together and you get mush. See, this is adulteration. Two things not to go together that are put together. Yahweh's law, the very first law in the parchments, says every seed after his kind. But don't believe me. It's in the book. Believe Yahweh God, the Creator, the Christ, or believe your prophets and your priests that say this has all been put away. Now we're going to go back into 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And let's see, Paul writes to the Corinthians. Paul sets down the rules and the regulations for the gospel. What is the gospel? It's the good news. But it's even more than the good news. It's the government instructions from Yahweh after the redemption of Emmanuel on a torture stake for the nation of Israel to abide by Yahweh God's laws that became Yahweh the Christ after the torture stake. First Corinthians chapter 11. Verse 1. It starts off, Paul writing saying, "Be ye followers of me." No, he doesn't want them to follow him. He wants these Corinthians to be students of what his instructions are. Be ye students of my teaching, even as I am of Yahweh. See, Paul is a student of Yahweh all the days of his life, wherever he went. And he never ceased from being a student. Now I praise you, Corinthians, that you remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances that as I have, it says here, delivered, as I have explained them to you. See, Paul didn't just bring in a manuscript and drop down on a table and say, read this, do as it say, not as I do. Paul went in and he explained the new government of Yahweh as it was to be implemented in the time to come, this AD, after the death time. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3. But I would have you that the head of every man is Yahweh, and the head of every woman is the man, and the head is Yahweh. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoreth Yahweh. Well, what do you mean, Yahweh? It says it dishonors his head. There are 3 lines past where it says the head of every man is Yahweh. Right here, verse 3. And the head of every man is Yahweh. Every man that prayeth with his head covered dishonoreth Yahweh as his head. Can't you read these things? But every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered dishonoreth her husband, her man, her source. For that is even all one as if she were shaven. For if the woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. Now see, excuse me, shorn there is the past participle of shave. Shave means to be cut off or removed. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and the glory of Yahweh, and the woman is the glory and the reflection of the man. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man built for the woman, but the woman built for the man. For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, Neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man in Yahweh. Excuse me. For as the woman is of the man, even so is the man by the woman, but all things are of Yahweh. See, what that's saying is that since the woman was taken from the rib, which is actually the DNA of Adam. See, I didn't go into this. I was saving this for this part. When Adam says, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, says that the wombed man that Yahweh had made to be the helpmate for Adam was exactly like his DNA, 100%. There wasn't a different tinge of skin. The hair color was the same. The eyes were the same. Right on down the line. Just like you see out in the yard. Every robin is the same. And they don't look like a robin and a bluebird. And a blackbird is different from the vultures out there. Even though they're close to the same color, they all have their particular little families where they live by Old Testament laws, rules, and regulations. Because they live in the old ways. But not us people on the earth today. We're too smart to do anything by the old ways. Now see, it was given that the woman was subjected to the man. But it even goes further than that. So if we go over to 1 Timothy chapter 2, we'll see a little thing over here. We'll start out here at 1 Timothy 2, verse 8. It says here, I will. See, if you put say in here instead of will, it brings the meaning of this out just a little better. I say, therefore, that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath or doubting. Which means they're supposed to be confident in what they ask for. In like manner, also the woman should adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair and gold, pearls, or costly array. But here's the thing. All that's saying is that the women of Israel should dress neatly, simply beautiful. Neatly and simply beautiful, without enormous amounts of jewelry, especially laced through the hairs, like the witch doctors' wives like to do over in the Aboriginal nations. Chapter 10, verse 10 rather. Let me go over that again. Verse 9. In like manner also that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel and shamefacedness, sobriety, not with braided hair, gold and pearls, or costly array, but, scratch out the parentheses, but with good works. Just to make themselves look very pleasing to the eye.
Yes.
Not to be fancy.
No.
Not to be overdone with the jewelry and the lace and the frills. Simply elegant. Verse 11. Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. And here we go, that word suffer again. I always want to say beat, but I know that means allow. But I allow not woman to teach or to usurp, upset, destroy the authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve built, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in transgression. Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in the faith, charity, holiness, and sobriety, and the understanding of Yahweh's name. Now, see, even Sarai was very respectful of her mother. Well, let's go over here and see what 1 Peter has to say about that. Chapter 3. See, even though Sarai was upset at her husband over a thing that she had brought up, she still had enough sense that over the course of their time together, that First Peter chapter 3, verse 6. And even Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughter ye are, as long as ye do dwell, and are not afraid with any amazement. And see, in today's vernacular, there's a lot of these ministers, pastors, and preachers that I've heard say, I'm still waiting for my wife to call me Lord. And he's all proud and vain. He's probably got a ministry corporation that's only fourth or fifth to many. And he's still all puffed up and vain. But here's the thing. Simple and pure respect.
Right.
Of the pecking order.
Right.
The woman has the right to have her input, but not the final say. Because the man is the head of the household.
Yes. And Yahweh's the head of the man.
Every time. Let's finish this out in Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16. Redeeming the time, because of the days are evil. Wherefore to be not unwise, but understanding what the will of Yahweh is. Be not unstable with wine whereas in excess, but be filled with Yahweh's Spirit. Speaking to yourselves, he goes into 5 or 6 different ways. Just talk about the things that are wrong with the world today. Explain to each other. Keep each other informed through spiritual hymns and proverbs. Giving thanks always, verse 20, giving thanks always for all things unto Yahweh, the Father, in the name of Yahweh the Christ. Now here's the one here. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. It says, submitting yourselves one to another. Now what does that mean? Everybody's the boss in town? No. There's still a pecking order. No matter where you go, you've always got someone that has the last say. Submitting yourself to one another here in the fear of Yahweh is telling you to be polite, to be orderly, and don't always try to be the first one to the coffee pot. Wives, submit yourself unto your husbands as unto Yahweh, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. The church. Isn't that a fine word there? Is Christ the head of that building over there where everybody goes? See, the church is not a building. The building will be raptured on May 21st. The building's going. The building's going.
Yeah, getting real deep now.
Yahweh's people are not going in the rapture. See, they should have never used this word church here. This word church, it means the elect. That goes right back over to Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4. Where you were elected from the foundation. But that still goes back into Matthew and Mark, where Emmanuel told his disciples, I speak in parables because it's not for everybody to understand the keys to the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
It's not for all nationalities to know. That's double witness. Matthew and Mark. By 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. But you don't have to believe Yahweh, because it's your choice, your free will. You can believe your pastor, your priest, and your prophets, and your ministers, and your neighbor, and your Sunday morning comic book performers. So let's read that without church there and put in other words. Verse 24. Therefore, as the elect are subject unto Yahweh, so let the wives be unto their husbands in all things. Husbands, love your wife, even as Yahweh has loved the elect, and gave himself for it, that Yahweh might sanctify and cleanse the elect with the washing of the water and by the word, that he may present the elect to himself as a glorious bride, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that the bride, the elect, should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourished his flesh, even as Yahweh nourishes the elect. The man is the provider. The man is the generator. The man is the Abba. The man is the source. The word Abba is nothing other than source. From the man comes the generations. That's why the man is the generator. All the woman have the eggs. Whether it's the trees, the plants, the fish, the birds, the female ladies of the world. Every nationality, every species, all the women have the eggs. And they drop and cycle. But if there's no seed, that egg dropped dead and cycle. Because the man is the source of the nationality.
Life.
The man is the source to maintain the purity, the integrity of the nationality.
Yes.
It's the man who is the source. It's the man that gets charged the greatest, the hardest, because the man is the king and the prophet of his little domain.
And protector.
Whether it's only a 50 by 50 square lot, he's to provide, nurture, care for, and protect from the wolves all things. Because the man is subject to Yahweh. The woman is under the man's protection. If the woman pays homage, not to call her husband Lord, possibly Mr. now and again. So just stop and think. King Solomon, what did it say? He had 700 and 300, 1,000 women of all strange nationalities. Now, did Yahweh God condemn King Solomon because he had 700 women? No, because King Solomon had more than one alien in his household that he loved. Because King Solomon had more than one knockery
And their God.
in his household is why Yahweh God came down face to face with King Solomon a second time and says, straighten up, boy. Your land and your heritage is at stake. And maybe King Solomon was sitting on his thumb this day. Or maybe he was in some computerized dream world where fantasy was the rule of the day. But I don't think so. Solomon was old. And as long as he was nurturing, as the 1,000 women were verbally beating on him, gimme, 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 gimme. All the other nationalities just picked Solomon apart. And he couldn't take it. It came to the point where he was so vain in his existence, he refused to understand what no meant, and did not employ that in his own household. So the nation was split. Just like Adam did not understand what no meant, and neither did Abraham. That's why these books were written, for our admonition, so we can understand where no means. See? Think of our Constitution today. Our great, quote unquote, our great leaders over here in Washington, D.C., they want to go over here and they want to save Iraq, and they want to save Afghanistan, and they want to help out the Egyptians, and they want to help out the Lebanese, and they want to go around and help all these other nations. Well, why don't they just take our Constitution and fold it up, put it in the mail, send it to them, because some wise men put that together. Since they don't want to use it, why don't they allow someone else to put it to work? Wouldn't it do some good, maybe? Just think about the 10 Commandments. Can't have those on the courthouse doors, see? See, the 10 Commandments over on the courthouse door makes for a hostile work environment. Well, how can that be? Well, if a lawyer's not allowed to go inside the court, not lie, steal, commit adultery, that's his work ethic. And we have lawyers outside the courts into the Washington, D.C. Senate and House of Representatives, down here in all the state capitals. The lawyers are setting up, the lawyers are making the rules, the lawyers are enforcing the rules. Today we have two bodies of government. We've got the executive, and we have the judicial joined right in with the Senate and the House of Representatives. That's why our nation just keeps going by. And before long, through executive order, man and woman will have no right to even coexist. See, today, we don't even have families. A man and a woman will go down over to their marriage bureau, and they'll ask for a marriage corporation license don't even understand they're getting a corporation license. So now, let's go through one last thing here, because Yahweh did not say that you had to go over someplace and beg to become a corporation to get married. But since 1920, in this once great United States, since the lawyers have taken over the Congress and the House of Representatives, and they maintain their seats on the judicial, they blended the family into a government corporation just a little bit different from a 501c3 ruled and regulated church. This, what we're about to read off from the overhead projector, was sent to me by one of my constituents who sent it to him from Arizona. Now this comes out of Arizona, so still pertinent in every state in the United States. The marriage license and a bit of truth. Enlightening conversation with a marriage license bureau about 15 years ago. My former wife of 26 and a half years of marriage filed for a divorce. We had 7 children. At the time I prepared a counterclaim to petition for dissolution, her attorney filed in domestic relations court. I met one afternoon with the head of the Mariposa County Superior Court Marriage License Bureau in downtown Phoenix. The Marriage License Bureau was headed by a young woman of about 25 years of age. I asked her to explain to me the general and statutory implications of the marriage license. She was very cooperative and called in an assistant, a tall man who at that time was working on an operations manual for the internal department use. She deferred for the most technical explanation to her assistant. He walked through the technicalities of the marriage license as it operates in Arizona. He mentioned that the marriage license is pretty much the same in other states, but there are differences. One significant difference he mentioned was Arizona is one of the 8 western states that are community property states. The other states are common law states, including Utah, with the exception of Louisiana, which is a Napoleonic Code state. Then he explained some of the technicalities of the marriage license. This man said, first of all, the marriage license is a secular contract between the parties of the state. The state is the principal party of the secular contract. The husband and wife are secondary and or inferior parties. The secular contract is a 3-way contract between the state as principal and the husband and wife as the 2 other legs of the contract. He said in the traditional sense, a marriage is a contract between the husband and wife and Yahweh God. But in the secular contract with the state, reference to Yahweh is a dotted line and not officially considered included in the secular contract at all. He also said, if the husband and wife wish to include Yahweh God as a party in their marriage, that is a dotted line they will have to add in their own mind. The state's what? In their own mind, because the state is separate. The state does not work as a square box, but as a triangle between husband and wife. The state's marriage license is strictly secular, said the man. He also said that what he meant by a relationship to Yahweh God being a dotted line meant that the state regards any mention of Yahweh God as irrelevant and meaningless. In his description of the marriage license contract, the related one to another dotted line, he said the traditional religious context marriage was a covenant between the husband, the wife, and Yahweh, with the husband and wife joined as one. This is not the case in the secular realm of the state's marriage license contract. The state is the principal or dominant party. The husband and wife are merely contractually joined as business partners and not in any religious sense, union, or way whatsoever. He may even be considered, said the man, connected to each other by another dotted line. The picture the man was trying to paint was that of a triangle with the state at the top and a solid line extending from the apex, which is the state, down the right side to the husband, separate line extending down the left side to the wife, and a dotted line merely showing that they considered themselves to have entered into a religious union of some sort that is irrelevant to the state. You have the marriage license, the secular contract diagram, right straight on down. The man further mentioned that this religious overtone is recognized by the state by requiring that the marriage must be solemnized. The marriage must be performed either by a state official or a minister of religion that has been 501c3'd. Deputized by the state to perform the marriage ceremony and make a return of the signed and executed marriage license contract to the state. Again, the man emphasized that the marriage is strictly secular relationship so far as the state is concerned, and because it is looked upon as a privileged business enterprise, various tax advantages and other political advantages have become attached to the marriage license contract that have nothing at all to do with marriage as a religious covenant or bond between Yahweh God and man and woman. By the way of reference, if you would like to read a legal treatise on marriage, one of the best is Principles of Community Property by William de Foudiac. At the outset, he explains that the community property law descends from Roman civil law through the Spanish codes of 600 A.D. written by Spanish jurisconsults. In the civil law, the marriage is considered to be for-profit venture or profit-making venture, even though it may never actually produce a profit in operation. And as the wife goes out to the local market to purchase foodstuff and other supplies for the marriage household, she is replenishing the stocks of the business. To restate the civil law, the marriage is considered to be a business venture that is for-profit business venture. Moreover, as children come into the marriage household, the business venture is considered to have borne fruit. Now, back to the explanation by Maricopa County Superior Court Marriage Bureau's administrative assistant. He went on to explain that every contract must have consideration. The state offers consideration in the form of actual license itself, the piece of paper, the certificate of marriage. The other part of the consideration by the state is the privilege to be regulated by statute. He also added that this privilege to be regulated by statute includes all related statutes and all court cases as they are and will be ruled on by the courts, and all statutes and regulations into the future in the years following the commencement of the marriage. He said, in a way, the marriage license contract is dynamic or flexible, ever-changing contract as time goes along, even though as the husband and wife do not realize that. My thought on this is, can it really be considered a true contract as one becomes aware of the failure by the state to make full disclosure of the terms and conditions? The contract must be entered into knowingly, intelligently, intentionally, and with fully informed consent. Otherwise, technically, there is no contract. Another way to look at the marriage license contract with the state is as a contract of adhesion, a contract between two disparate, unequal parties. Again, a flawed contract. Such a contract with the state is said to be a specific performance contract as to the privileges, duties, and responsibilities that attach. Consideration on the part of the husband and the wife is the actual fee paid and the implied agreement to be subject to the state statutes, rules, and regulations, and all the court cases rule upon related to marriage law, family law, children, and property rights. Now see, you make an agreement to follow all the rules and regulations of man here, but y'all want to put Yahweh's rules off in a corner and say, what does it matter here? He emphasized that his contractual consideration by the bride and groom places them in a definite and defined by law position inferior subject to the state. He commented that very few people realize this. He also said that it is very important to understand that children born to the marriage are considered by law as the contract-bearing fruit, meaning the children primarily belong to the state, even though the law never comes out to say so in so many words. In regard, the children born to the contract regard as the contract-bearing fruit, he said, is virtually important for parents to understand two doctrines that become established in the United States during the 1930s. The first doctrine of parens patria, the second doctrine of local parentias. Parentia means literally the parent of the country or state, and more bluntly, the state is the undisclosed true parent. Along this line, the 1930s Arizona Supreme Court case states that parents have no property right in their children and have custody of their children during good behavior at the sufferance, allowance of the state. This means that the parents may raise their children and maintain custody of their children as long as the children do not offend the state. But if the children in some manner displease the state can step in at any time and exercise its superior status and take control of its children. The parents are only conditional caretakers. And from there it just goes on to explain that you're locked, just like a 501c3 church is locked into a situation where somebody outside the principal area of your particular domain Go ahead, Tom. Has control over everything you do. Simply because you put your name on a contract with the State Marriage License Bureau. Is that in these books?
No.
Why did they get rid of common law marriage? Man and woman lived together for a few years and they're common law wed. Because if these two people can get along without having to pay the government to get a couple of rights and a couple of tax breaks, because I know people who have never gone and received this tax or this marriage license contract certificate from a state are more honest, reliable, and dependent to their mate than those that have the contracts. Yahweh God says, choose a mate wisely, be honest to one another, and you will be happy.
That's right.
Man to woman as woman is to man. I'm Yahweh's witness, Teacher Ray Bunzow. P.O. Box 143, Roscommon, Michigan 48653, U.S. of A. Today's 1 day or 2 days before her break year 5772. So I just hope that through this little discourse, to understand where the state takes away the blush from the bride. Now think into these things, because everything is different when you see it in black and white. Black and white, and a few minutes to sit down and discern exposes the rest of the story. So think, it just might be hip to be square and go back to the old ways of doing things. I wish to thank you for being allowed to speak here today, and may Yahweh bless.
Thank you.
Yahweh bless you.